Hi there, Nick here from Conservation Careers, and welcome to the podcast. Now, what if we gave as much love to insects as we do to elephants? Well, in this episode, we're joined by Dr Kate Umbers, who's the Senior Lecturer in Zoology at Western Sydney University and Managing Director of Invertebrates Australia, and we have a passionate, perspective-shifting conversation about the beauty and importance of bugs. Kate shares why insects deserve a central place in conservation, the inspiring work of the Insect Conservation Lab and her career pivot from policing to zoology, and her honest reflections on motherhood, motivation and choosing hope in conservation. From glowworms to Christmas beetles to the mighty Bogong Moth, this episode is packed with quirky facts, emotional truths and practical career advice. If you've ever felt overlooked, underfunded or uncertain about your conservation journey, this one's for you. Enjoy.
So officially, Associate Professor Kate Umbers from Western Sydney University and the Managing Director of Invertebrates Australia. I also have a couple of other roles, which is a biodiversity counsellor, and I think I'm currently still a co-chair of the grasshopper specialist group for the IUCN.
So many hats you're wearing. Yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining. And actually, it's a bit of a privilege for me because you're also a listener. You were saying before, and you've mentioned that previously that
Yeah,
you do actually
totally. Yeah.
listen. Yeah, it's funny when you do these things. You rarely meet people who listen or get to engage with them properly. So yeah, thanks for listening, number one, and thanks also for sharing your
Great.
time. Yeah, and
It's a
jumping
really
on.
great resource.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So you've got all sorts going on. Yeah, as you say, well, I'm reading from my notes. You're the principal investigator of Insect Conservation Lab in Western Sydney University. You're the founding managing director of Invertebrates Australia too, among many other things. Um, we don't speak to many people working in kind of invertebrate or insect conservation on the podcast. I can't remember any off the top of my head actually out of 150 plus episodes. So I'm really excited to be kind of talking about insects and the work you're doing around it. Maybe we can start with that. Like, what makes insects important or invertebrates important, and why do you think they're so overlooked? Because I think they are overlooked in conservation.
Yeah, it's a really funny one. Um, People often open with that question of why are they important,
Yeah,
which is typically not a question you might ask someone that works on elephants or tigers or koalas, why are they important? And
yeah,
so it's an interesting kind of like I guess narrative around insects that we hear a lot. There's sort of a utilitarian argument that comes up. So
yeah,
like definitely want to acknowledge that yes, they are super important. They do lots of really important things in ecosystems, but they really make us happy. Like if you see a butterfly coming through your garden, that's a lovely thing. That's a wonderful moment in your day. So there's a lot of other things that insects are doing that I think we don't immediately think about. And actually, that's really important. It's important to conserve them for their own sake, obviously. It's important to conserve them also for our sake. So yeah, lots of unpacking to do about kind of the why of insect conservation and invertebrates more broadly.
yeah. You're right. I mean, we don't have to justify other species or other groups like we do insects, do we? Yeah, and yet they are so important for so many functions within ecosystems, apart from their beauty, yeah, and everything else that they bring. So yeah, and they're a lot of fun. I mean, gosh, the diversity of insects too. There's some crazy insects out there, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, in Australia, I think we might have something around 80,000 species of insects. Um,
Jeez.
um, of course, they're not all named. Whether or not that's important might be something we talk about
Yeah.
during our chat. But yeah, there's heaps.
And put that into perspective, bird-wise, I'm guessing about 500 species of bird in Australia, give or take. So
Yeah, I think there's like 600 or 700, but yeah,
yeah,
it's like roughly the same as Panama, which is
yeah,
totally cool, right? Like there's hyper diverse Central American countries. Australia has roughly the same number. Yeah, it's you could ignore them and carry on with conservation and do lots of great work. Not that I am condoning that, but it is one
yeah,
possible action. There's just so few species. Of course, everybody loves them and they're beautiful and they're important for engaging people. But, when you think about the bulk of biodiversity and what we should be, um, you know, trying to focus on and maintain um, both diversity and abundance and ecological function and all those beautiful things we see in our garden and all that sort of stuff. Insects are a really important part of that.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right with butterflies too. I mean, it is a real moment every year for me when the spring comes and I see the first butterfly in the garden, which is for us, it's always a brimstone, this bright kind of yellowy green butterfly, like a new penny kind of flies through. It's like, oh, yes, spring's here at last. It's wonderful. And then they all start coming back one after another from there. So it's a kind of
Yeah,
turning point in the year I look forward to. Yeah.
and it's certainly in very seasonal countries like the UK and most of Europe and North America, that really strong effect of spring arriving, I think, has a profound impact on people's kind of psychology, and yeah, seeing the first butterfly and also the first birds and things like that.
Yeah.
We don't get that really strong seasonality in most parts of Australia, so we sit in that weird sort of subtropical, temperate, warm temperate sort of thing where we don't see it as strongly. So it's not as prominent here, but it is certainly, I think also because our trees don't lose their leaves and all that kind of stuff, that it's not quite so strong. But there's a challenge in there for us working in Australia is to get people to notice, despite that being more subtle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess sort of linking then to threats and the status of invertebrates around the world and thinking through like it's easy to see the first of something like my brimstone in the garden. It's you can define that. It's an absolute moment. That's the first one I've seen this year. That's the first swallow or whatever it might be. That's the first of the species we've seen and described. But it's really hard to say for certainty when you've seen the last of something, isn't it? Because you may see another. Yeah. And it's sort of, it's a sort of strange quandary really that I sort of hang on to as to, yeah, when is that last swallow? You might see another one. It's the same with species too. When is that species officially gone? I was wondering if you can just like talk to like how are invertebrates into however you want to describe them, whether it's in Australia or globally or whatever, like how are they doing? As a group of animals on this planet? Are they under threat? Like, what's their status?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that concept of the lost lasts. It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
We don't necessarily notice the last time that something happens. Yeah, look,
Oh,
it's probably not a surprise to find out that Australian invertebrates are, facing the same threats, the same major threats as everywhere in the world: climate change, land clearing, lots of different toxins going into the environment, invasive species, all that kind of stuff. Those central themes, regularly reoccurring conservation stories around the world.
mm,
Um, in Australia, we have the oldest continuing living culture in the world. Indigenous Australians have this incredibly deep history. Um, but of course, colonization has destroyed a lot of their knowledge. And so there's a big job there to and repair knowledge, repair Indigenous people's connections to country, facilitate that, and so that we can manage the country in a really in a much more kind of, I guess, clever way.
yeah, yeah.
um, and then the European history of Australia is only very short. It's only a couple of hundred years. And so there's this really interesting, I guess, disjunct between, we should have literal millennia of knowledge, that's been taken. And then on top of that, we have this layer of like really short-term European knowledge that there's very little of, and the
Mm,
relative to the diversity of the country and the landscape and things like that. So we know a lot, and we know enough certainly to act in conservation and to look after, there's lots of sort of iconic species that we can work on, and lots of opportunity for conservation. I mean, there's 1,000 invertebrate species that you can find in Australia that are listed,
mm,
whether it be the IUCN or in Australian legislation or wherever, but there's 1,000 invertebrate species listed that occur in Australia. So there's plenty to be going on with, even though there's a lot of knowledge gaps,
mm.
and a lot of work to do to repair knowledge.
So tell us about your work then at the Insect Conservation Lab. Yeah, so you're the principal investigator there. Yeah, what paint us a bit of a picture. What is the Insect Conservation Lab, and what are you and the other members of the team kind of doing to help conserve insects?
Yeah, I don't know how many times other lab leaders change their lab name, but But we became the Insect Conservation Lab, I don't know how many years ago now, maybe 7 years ago or something like that, or eight. Before that, I think it was, the Ecology and Evolution Lab or something like that. So I guess even just the name of my kind of, research group, talks a lot about the history of my career and where I've kind
Yeah.
of come from and going to. But what we're doing at the moment is we're working on an iconic species in Australia called the Bogong Moth, which is a really long distance return migrant that moves through, well, possibly up to 4,000 kilometers across the country. We still have work to do to figure out if that's happening. But over really massive distances,
Mm.
from low country, when it gets too hot, they move up into the highest mountains in Australia and spend the summers there. And they're really important to Indigenous people across the Alps. They're a really important food source and all kinds of things. And then they are thought to kind of move back into the lowlands to breed, and they are endangered. They're listed on the IUCN Red List because Australia has really short mountains. We're not exactly known for our alpine regions, right? But we do have these treeless, these little treeless bands at the top of our mountains where it's too cold for trees to grow, and we have snow all winter and all that sort of stuff. But they're heating up really rapidly. They're really short. Maximum elevation is 2,228 meters
Mm.
at the very highest of the highest mountains. So the places for the bogong moths to spend their summers are shrinking really fast. And so they connect the lowland to the high country and do all these really important things that migratory critters do. And they're really important nutrients for the critters in the Alps that eat them when they get there. They also have obligate nematodes. They're only in these little alpine caves. They certainly visit flowers all up and down the country, and maybe they're moving pollen through the system as well. So they're a really interesting and really important creature that we're trying to understand where they come from. We don't understand their migration at all. So we're trying to map their migration. Where are they breeding? Where are the ones in the different caves across the mountains? Where did they come from? Different places, the same places, all of this is completely unknown. So there's a lot of work to be done there to map their migration. The other things we're working on is reintroducing previously thought extinct snails into Norfolk Island, which is way off the coast of Australia and is officially part of Australia, but is very independent, has its own identity, absolutely. So yeah, some of my students are figuring out what sticks to a snail shell to make sure we can see if it's one we've released or if it's one that's new, and all those sorts of really complicated questions that you have to get. Turns out it's really hard to get things to stick to tiny little snail shells.
Right.
Um, so there's a whole lot of different things, but those are the two major projects that we're focused on at the moment.
Yeah. Amazing. How are you just drilling into like one bit of that with the moth that you're working on? How are you like plotting its migratory route? How are you figuring out where it's going? Have you got, I don't know, public sensors that are mapping them? Are you integrated with moth groups? I'm assuming they're nocturnal. I mean, if they're moving that far over such a huge country, how are you collecting that data? And how do you know even if do you know if individuals are going from A to B? Can you track, individual moths and their movements?
Yeah, look, I think so. This project is sort of funded for 4 years, and I think what this project will do is we'll actually set the foundation to answer all of those questions.
Yeah,
We are really starting at the start.
yeah,
So when we're using all of the things you've mentioned and more. So we're using, isotopes to try to look at the chemical signature of the wings of the moths and see if we can link that to a place in Australia where there were caterpillars, because they maintain, even through metamorphosis, these chemical signatures, these isotope signatures of what they were eating when they were caterpillars. Um, there's eDNA type techniques to see if you can detect whether moths were in soil in different people's on people's farms or in conservation lands, those sorts of places. We are absolutely working with an organization called Zoos Victoria, which is sort of the umbrella organization for all of the zoos in Victoria, hence the name.
yeah,
But they're running a great citizen science program called Moth Tracker, which just encourages people to take photos of bogong moths and upload them. We're also encouraging people to take photos and put them on iNaturalist, because that's a
yeah.
fantastic tool. And then we're developing a tag to try to get people tagging bogong moths and looking for them en route and up in the high country and those sorts of things to emulate monarch watch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like a real range of different approaches. Like we sort of feel like we need all of them, to try to get things going and I guess that's conservation all over, right? You feel like there's about 5 or 6 different avenues that you need to try to pursue, try to prioritize, but kind of do a lot of them at the same time as well.
Yeah, and because I guess they're understudied like many insects, you're having to be really innovative at the very beginning, and it sounds really exciting. There's so many different ways in which you're trying to tackle and answer a simple question of so how are these animals moving through a landscape? So many
Yeah,
techniques and new techniques as well you're kind of bringing to the table.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, some of these things haven't been done in Australia because the research infrastructure isn't there. So, like for example, like some of the you need like an isoscape, which is like how the isotopes are distributed across the landscape before
Right.
you can map a moth onto that thing. So you need
Yeah.
to build that infrastructure. So those sorts of things. Um, but it is really exciting to work with bogong moths because it's an insect that Australians have heard of. It's very famous here, and I think it's a lot to do with the fact that they show up on people's like in major cities, like in Sydney and Melbourne and places like that. They show up in huge numbers, or at least historically they have. They find their way into Parliament House in Canberra on their way to the mountains, and kind of there's some fantastic parliamentary records of them of the of the ministers saying like, excuse me, speaker, we have to adjourn, I have moths up my sleeve, these kinds of things. So they're really not like, not only are they important in Indigenous Australian culture, but in mainstream Australian culture as well. They have this sort of folklore attached to them. So they're really, so when you're talking to people about them, people go, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, which is not all that common with insects. So it is really exciting from that perspective, and people are interested in them and they care about them, and they know that they should be in big numbers, and they're concerned when they hear that the caves are empty and things like that, or that the bushfires came through when the moths were there in summer. And it's wonderful to work on a species that is both really important, really cool, but also, there's already people caring about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that's why you chose it as a study species among the other species you work on. It has that charismatic public appeal. Yeah.
It's certainly part of it. The reason I wanted to pursue it is because I have been working for so long in the Australian mountains, and it's a really important species and a really amazing species there. And just wanted to figure out what was going on with it. Um, yeah, and one very famously, what had been happening is that a marvelous colleague of mine, Eric Warrant, who's based at Lund University in Sweden, has been and continues to be doing some incredible work on their navigation and their biology. And so I knew about that, but the question started to rise, but they rely on these cold alpine caves. This is not good. What's going on? Yeah, and then the population sort of spectacularly crashed in 2017, where whole caves that should be filled with millions and millions of bogong moths, like around 4 billion moths should arrive every year in the mountains. Um, yeah, it's an enormous number of kilojoules, an
Yeah.
enormous number of kilojoules. There's something like 30%, 40% fat, these things. Um, yeah, and there was just whole areas empty, that should have been just teeming, walls of the caves lined. Like the stats from the 50s are like 14,000 moths per square meter kind of densities, huge numbers of these things. And when people went in there expecting to count them and see how this season's going, and there was whole areas with just nothing. It was very alarming. So it kind of kicked off, yeah, that new research project for me.
And before we kind of turn to your career journey, actually, and hearing more about the work you've been doing outside of this, like how, I was wondering if you could speak to like how easy was it to get funding for the work, like particularly with the Bogong Moth or with others as well? Are there funders out there interested in this? Was that an easy ride? You've got a 4-year project, that's great. How did that arise? Yeah.
Yeah, I think um, an easy ride.
Yeah.
No, certainly not. I mean, um, we talked right at the beginning about, insects being seen mostly as as something functional. We were talking about ecosystem services and, what what can what can these insects do for my crops, or how can I get rid of these pests, and those sorts of things. And so reminding people that they love insects
Mm.
is what our job is, to really get funding behind these critters. So a colleague of mine, Tanya Laddie at the University of Sydney, and with Invertebrates Australia, we started this Christmas beetle count where Tanya's been chasing, trying to understand what's going on with Christmas beetles. And the reason we started that was because we would get called by the Australian media, every December, like, where are all the Christmas beetles? And I'm like, I don't know, I work on grasshoppers. She's, I don't know, I work on bees. I don't know, we know.
Yeah.
They kept, we're thinking, well, okay, well, they're literally, well, no, they're figuratively knocking our door down here. We really should jump onto them. So that's the long answer, but the short answer is really that there's been so little done in Australia that their opportunities are there to get interest and resources to these really charismatic groups at the moment. So getting some resources behind the Bogong Moth happened quite quickly. But typically speaking, and when we talk about having 1,000, listed species in Australia, there's a tiny fraction of them where any conservation work is happening at all because there's no funding put towards it.
Yeah.
So does that answer you?
It does. It also
I think I
shows,
got there.
yeah, the kind of tension between accessing funding for um, underrepresented species like insects, and also the need to kind of jump on the charismatic species as a kind of gateway, a flagship almost to kind of open doors. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of
Yeah.
a pragmatic approach to, well, you know, let's start here.
Yeah, exactly. And try and expand out. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about you then, your career so far. Where did your interest in kind of the natural world start? Is there a moment or an instance or an individual where this kind of this spark was ignited?
I don't think for the natural world, I don't think there's a spark moment.
Yeah.
I think it was more around like all of my family holidays kind of on the south coast of New South Wales, snorkeling and at the beach and all that kind of stuff, in
Mm,
combination with visiting my grandparents' kind of hobby farm
mm,
for most of my childhood, and being connected, to those kinds of places and feeling a sense of my identity being wrapped up in those sorts of places. Just yeah, it was just all normal to be in nature and to be in with these kind of animal systems.
mm,
So yeah, I'm not entirely sure um, when it started, but that certainly was a really prominent part of my childhood, was being exposed to those sorts of things.
mm. And when you look back at your career so far, like what have been some of the kind of key steps or milestones or moments that have helped to get you to where you are today? Like, yeah, what's happened?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I was like a real sporty person, so like was pretty well completely removed from this world, I guess. But I was always I played a lot of netball, and I was always the kind of the weird one that would get the beetle off the netball court while we were training. Like, oh, Kate's gonna touch it, just get out of the way and I'll move. That sort of thing. So it was always kind of there in the background, but yeah, then I left school and went to university, and I'd studied a Bachelor of Policing, which
Mm,
was which was an interesting one. But I was interested in like I found myself mostly interested in the biology surrounding this stuff, the sociology, the psychology, all those sorts of things. But I got towards the end of it, and I was just really like, this is not for me. I don't know what's for me, but the coolest job I can think of is to be a marine biologist. This is like the coolest thing I can think of. And then I was thinking, well, what was I, like 20, 21 or something like that, 21, 22. Well, maybe I should go and enroll in a Bachelor of Marine Science, and see what happens. I was always, because I was into sport, I didn't really work very hard at high school, and I was slacking off quite a bit. And I remember very clearly chemistry 101, the very first chemistry exam I ever took at university. And it was like a midterm exam. It was, worth like 15% of my mark. I was so scared that I was holding the desk and the desk was shaking because I
Mm,
was so worried that this was going to be the moment where I found out that I couldn't do this, I
mm,
wasn't capable of it. And I did okay, like I got like 70 or 80% for the exam. And I thought,
mm,
okay, if I can do this, maybe I can do the other stuff. But I remember in biology that same year feeling like this incredibly strong feeling that I had come home. It was really strong.
mm.
Like I was sitting in a lecture theatre, listening to this, like first year biology and just never ever wanting to be anywhere else. And it was really, really strong. So it was great. So I knew then that I was where I was supposed to be.
And what was it about biology that really kind of spoke to you that you felt was just right?
I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know. I, the only thing I can say is that it's something about being a living thing and understanding living things.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It doesn't really make much sense, but I don't have any other way to really articulate it.
yeah.
It just clicked for me in that moment, and I just was, yeah, this is it. This is great. This is where I need to be.
So you found your
Um,
place, you built your confidence through exam results that you weren't expecting. You know, you got this. What happened next?
yeah, then I guess it was just going through, the sort of recommended undergraduates classes and realizing, like having, this profound realization that, oh, if you want to have big adventures and make big discoveries and learn really cool stuff in biology, it's the invertebrates that's where it really is.
Uh-huh.
Because all the other animals have got roughly the same number of eyes, roughly the same number of legs, like it's all pretty samey. But if you want to, really just have a deep dive into the weird and wonderful, that's where it is.
Yeah,
And that was, through some great lecturers working, teaching around those subjects. Yeah, so just became really clear that that was the exciting part.
yeah. What's really interesting, like, as a biologist, and I've had a similar path myself, I guess, really is like a lot of people think it'd be quite cool to identify a species, like, yeah, to describe a species new to science. I guess we'd all like to do it, but very few of us have done it. But you hear about people, they go to the Amazon, they lift a rock up, there's a load of beetles, and one of them's new to science, and insects are where it's at. Yeah. Have you identified a new species to science? If you haven't, how would you go about doing it? Like, what should someone do? What's the easiest way to go and find a new species?
I know what you mean, like the sort of the species discovery, or I think nowadays we're more using species description just to acknowledge that, most of these species are probably known by humans other
Yeah.
than Europeans for a long time. Um, it is very tantalizing when you're sort of new to the area. And I also remember, first learning about like, probably half the species in your backyard are new species and kind of being blown away by that idea that,
Yeah.
we don't know. Um, I taxonomy is not great. Me and taxonomy are not a good match.
Hard,
It
right?
requires
Yeah.
a lot of meticulous,
Yeah.
careful illustrations and things like
Counting of
that.
leg hairs and yeah.
Oh, this is not my strength. But I have accidentally done that anyway. So the like some of the work I've done previously in the mountains, in the Australian mountains, I've been working on these grasshoppers that change color depending on what temperature they are and do all this groovy stuff. And was looking at them in New South Wales and was like, oh yeah, that's what they look like. And then drove, 500 kilometers down to the Victorian mountains and was like, no.
Mhm.
These guys, well, they have blue here and orange there, and they're like the wrong shape here. And so it was really clear. And so, the five species did some genetic work. Yeah, it's probably 15 species of those grasshoppers, and then started working on some katydids that do some cool displays showing their abdomens by revealing their wings and all kinds of cool stuff.
Mm.
I thought, oh, they live all the way from Cairns to Hobart. That's 4,000 kilometers and across a rather rough little ocean, the Bass Strait, whatever it's called. Not an
Mm.
ocean, but yeah, body of water.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
The
that's
Tasman Sea, maybe? I don't know.
yeah,
Who
bit of
knows?
it,
Move on.
maybe. I don't know. That stuff. And yeah, and that's probably 8 or 10 species, So you just kind of,
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, it's partly just working in Australia,
Yeah.
Um, they're just there, but yeah, so I guess so. I guess I have, but it's not that bit that I find exciting. It's what they do and
Yeah.
and how they're built and yeah, all their sort of interesting behaviors and physiologies and those sorts of things that are the most fascinating of all.
So, Kate, I also see that you are the managing director and the founder of Invertebrates Australia as well, which is really interesting. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, so myself and two colleagues, Tanya Laddie and Jess Marsh, founded Invertebrates Australia in 2021, um, on the back of the really devastating Black Summer bushfires that gripped Australia just before COVID, actually. So it was the December and January, February, just before the world went into lockdown in 2020.
Oof.
And it was so much of Australia, so much of, well, the bush around my house, the bush around my field site, so much of it was on fire at once. It was terrifying for like the vast majority of the population of Australia.
Mm.
So Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, that whole, what is that, 2,000 kilometer stretch, there were fires all the way.
Oof.
Um, Rainforest was burning, and right up to the beach was burning. And I live in the Blue Mountains, and three directions around my house, there was fire, in 5 kilometers in three of the directions from around my house. 85% of the Blue Mountains Wollemi National Park burned. That's the size of Lebanon. And it was severe fire. So it's the kind of fire that doesn't kind of stay in the top of the canopy. It kind of burns right down through into the soil and kills everything. It doesn't just kind of do the normal thing that Australian kind of bushfires do. And it was so devastating and so enormous. I and my colleague Jess was living on Kangaroo Island and still is. And half of Kangaroo Island's vegetation was severely burned. And a lot of that world footage of koalas with their burned paws and all that kind of stuff came from Kangaroo Island. And I just remember calling Tanya one day and just saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We're academics, we're all at universities. We have to do something. We are the privileged people in this in this equation. We know there's a problem. We know, very well about all the critters that are being killed. I mean, billions of animals, billions and billions of invertebrates, billions of vertebrates. I mean, the numbers of things that were killed were just staggering, right?
Mm.
And it triggered a whole lot of people to start organizations. And we started Invertebrates Australia off the back of that because we just needed a mechanism to do more. Um, but it turns out that a bunch of academics trying to start a company is a challenging idea. So the three of us, founded the business and then registered it as a charity and all this kind of stuff. And then, some of our friends jumped on board and we were like, right, so what do we do now? We had to create, like a strategic plan. I got a mentor to try to figure out how to run an organization. There's an organization called Kilfinnan who mentors new CEOs with seasoned CEOs. I'm sorry, matches new CEOs with seasoned CEOs for free. Okay, great. There's someone who knows what to do. She was like, right, well, the first thing you need is a bookkeeper because you have a big grant that you got, that you're starting this organization off with for a project. You need a board of directors. I was like, oh, what's that? What's one of those? Oh, and what do they do? Oh, right. They take responsibility for the entire organization. Right. That sounds important. Okay. Let's do that then. So, and this is like, what are we, 2025? This is 4 years we've been
Yeah.
on this little crazy journey. But it's allowed us to, partner with lots of different conservation organizations to sit in that conservation space where we have this industry link now, where we can get more resources to look after more species by being in the not-for-profit sector as well as in the university sector, and coming into the not-for-profit sector with kind of some scientific expertise behind us is helpful for people to kind of trust that we can help with whatever ecological or conservation questions they might have, or that we're like partners that are reasonably low risk, given that we have sort of career
Yeah.
given that we have career reputations behind us a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so yeah, since then we've been kind of walking in these two worlds of academia and of sort of not-for-profit conservation, really tiny startup, and trying to do both
Hmm.
um, simultaneously, and it's been quite a ride.
What have you learnt about sort of starting a charity from scratch? Because it's something maybe a lot of people are interested in doing, but not many actually do. Like what have you learnt that could help others?
Yeah, you need there's certain people that you absolutely need, and those are the finance people.
Hmm.
The financy, taxy kind of people.
Mhm.
They know the rules of the game. They know what's legal and all that kind of stuff, and what you need to report and those sorts of things. You absolutely need them. They're critical. Can't do without them. And people out there that have those skills, that are interested in conservation, desperately needed in conservation. We
Mhm.
need you. Um, yeah, that really kind of basic business stuff, I
Mhm.
think, is very easy for people with those skills to underestimate just how valuable they are um, to this sector. And then, yeah, like it's the coolest place to work, I think. I mean, it's so passionate. Everybody in the conservation not-for-profit sector in Australia, at least, are just brimming with excitement and yeah, let's work together, and yeah, this is so cool, and oh wow, there's more, and and let's all grow the pie of resources. Like, it's not this competitive kind of, oh, you got that grant and I got this grant kind of thing. It's just it's absolutely the opposite. Yes, more people, more energy, more resources, more excitement, more expertise. Let's move forward together. And that's been so cool. It's been an amazing privilege to be able to step into that world and be part of it. Um, and compared to dealing with university administration, having a tiny little organization that can make decisions really fast, and that's amazing. It obviously comes with, very low stability compared to a giant organization and all that sort of stuff. But it's yeah, that kind of fast moving, agile kind of yeah, activities that you can get up to in a small not-for-profit is really exciting, sort of startup world sort of stuff. Yeah, so it's very different. But yeah, really very, very lucky to be in a position where I can be in both worlds and contribute in those ways.
Yeah, yeah. Which leads me perfectly into my next question, actually, is what do you kind of love about your job, your role? Yeah. And also I'm going to extend that. Like, what does your job typically look like, sort of day to day, week to week? Someone who's never met you before, how would you describe what you actually do?
Yeah, I guess I mean, maybe what I did or what I do now, because like when
Hmm.
we're talking about sort of, my university years, where I was always thinking about ecology, evolution, and behavioral ecology and those sorts of questions. And it wasn't, and then I made a shift into conservation quite deliberately. Um, so which one would you like me to answer?
Well, that one actually, yeah, yeah. Let's keep going with your career story. You're right. So you've left university and you're shifting towards conservation. You started off in policing, so there's been quite a bit of change gone through. What happened next? You found your area, insects.
Yeah, like I've been working on those grasshoppers in the mountains and doing all that sort of stuff, and and life goes on, and I had my daughter in 2018.
Yeah.
And when people say, like, you asked me before, did you have a moment? Was there one of those key moments? Yeah, like it's a little bit stereotypical, I guess, in that it's related to one of my kids, but I had sort of a transformative experience when I went to Borneo when I was like in my early 20s and kind of,
Mm.
had this amazing, experience with biology. And I'd always thought, if I ever have kids, I'd love to bring them back here. And I remember watching her when she was one, playing with a toy orangutan. And I thought, oh, it's going to be so great. When you're bigger, I'm going to take you to Borneo and show you the wild orangutan that I saw. And then I realized, you know, in 20 years, that may not be possible.
Mm.
There may be no wild orangutan left. They may not be there. I mean, it's a real
Mm.
possibility, right? We're
Mm.
talking
Mm.
about these areas on Borneo that are being destroyed for palm oil.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I just went from this like really happy moment to this really just reality check,
Mm.
right? And yeah, and so it was sort of obvious that from then on it was going to be pick a side, you know. Working in ecology and evolution and behavioral ecology is wonderful and it indirectly contributes to conservation in all kinds of really wonderful ways. And it provides important stories and it does all this lovely stuff. I mean, you know, there's so many wonderful documentaries made because of the discoveries that behavioral ecologists have made and evolutionary biologists, all that stuff. But I wasn't comfortable to sit there anymore.
Yeah. 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 It's when you're working in sort of science and research academia, you can answer interesting questions because they're intellectually stimulating, or you can choose to answer questions that are going to help that species, aren't they? And it feels like that's the side you feel like you're picking. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like I had to choose and I had to stand for something.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and working in the world's shortest mountains with climate change and snow-dependent species and all that stuff is not exactly like a difficult leap, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to ask, what do you stand for?
It's a really nice question. I think I stand for looking after nature.
Mm.
I think that's all it really is.
Mm. Simple as that. Yeah. Yeah. If someone's listening to this and they love what you're doing, it sounds so interesting. Yeah. And you've sparked an interest in insects and insect conservation and studying them and helping them like you've done in your career and continue to do brilliantly. Like what careers advice would you give them? They might be at university, they might be a career switch, they might be working in the police force, who knows? Yeah, what are the kind of the main things to sort of bear in mind that, these things might help you?
I mean, I know you talk a lot about mentoring and things like that on your podcasts, on episodes
Mm.
of your podcast, but I think um, it's more than that. It's about not being afraid to ask really amazing people for advice.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's really intimidating to ask big cheeses in your field,
Yeah.
like, hey, I was thinking about doing this. What do you think? Or, can you tell me how you got to where you got or whatever? Um, so I think maybe there's a little bit of, there's a big bit of vulnerability there
Yeah.
and a lot of bravery sometimes to ask people. But yeah, that one I think is an important one. Um, that certainly got me a long way to ask people that I admire for help or direction.
How
Um,
did you go about doing that practically? Were you sending emails, writing phone calls? Were you just bumping into people like just talk about that experience, please? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's all of those things, like just depending on what you've got available to you.
Yeah.
Maybe you're at a conference and that person is over there or something, and
Yeah.
you say like, can anyone introduce me to that person? Or
Yeah.
or just really awkwardly go over and say, hello, I don't really know how to talk to you about this, but I would really like to ask you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, if someone's a jerk about that when they can see that you're very vulnerable and
Yeah.
then you probably don't want to hang out with them anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's a good filter. Most of the time people are going to be absolutely lovely and be
Hmm.
like, yeah, sure. But yeah, so that like in person, probably the scariest one.
Mm.
Sending someone an email, getting an introduction, like an e-introduction via someone.
Mm.
Um, yeah, any way you can. I don't know. I find like LinkedIn is actually really good for this kind of
Yeah,
stuff these
yeah,
days. So yeah, I don't really think it matters how.
yeah,
It's more important that you do it. So if there's one way that you feel comfortable, then that's the way to do it, I guess, is maybe
yeah,
the
yeah.
the way forward. I'm not really sure exactly, but yeah, that's important. But also, I don't know, uh, just having a go. Um, with whatever resources you have. Like it's easy for me to kind of say, so, I was I'm in academic career, find myself with a continuing position where I have total freedom over my research choices. And I go, hey, I don't want to work in evolutionary biology anymore. I want to be a conservation scientist now. And I just choose to pursue different projects. And that's a super easy transition for someone like me. And it's absolutely not like that for others necessarily, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and I'm loath to encourage people to volunteer just because it's so hard for some people to volunteer. But of course, if you
Mm,
can, it's a great thing. But yeah, I think just trying to find those mentors, trying to find people that can help you or that will help you, and
mm,
um, yeah, not be ashamed of that.
mm,
Because it's not about you, it's about the cause. And that's the key
mm.
thing. It's if you it's you have to take yourself out of it. You have to stop worrying about how you're going to come across and what's going to happen if they think you're silly and all that sort of stuff. It's not about you. It's about the cause. And if you and the person you're trying to talk to are both pursuing the same cause, then things are likely to work out.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely feel that. Yeah. There is something about conservation is that it links and connects us because you have that one thing in common. You both care. Yeah, you both care about your species, nature, however you want to frame it. Yeah, yeah. And it's funny, like as someone who does these sort of chats quite a lot, and I enjoy them and find them sort of quite comfortable, particularly remotely. Yeah, in a conference setting, I would be really nervous walking up to someone, yeah, today,
Yeah,
yeah, and saying, "Oh, hi, yeah, I like your work, and can I chat to you about it?" Whatever. That is daunting. So I absolutely get it. And a lot of this comes down to the word confidence, doesn't it? It's like, yeah,
totally.
backing yourself and giving it a go and finding ways that fit. I really like what you said there as well. So for me, I would probably send an email beforehand saying, I
Yeah,
think we're going to this conference. Can I
yeah,
meet you for a quick coffee? And like tee it up so the ice is broken. Do you know what I mean? They're
yeah,
expecting
yeah,
me.
yeah,
I'd
yeah,
try and
yeah.
make it a bit easy somehow because I would totally would feel that nerves as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the other thing is probably have something to talk about.
Yeah.
Like the worst thing to do would be to go like, hi, and then be just like, like you got to
Yeah.
have a few kind of, I wanted to ask you about this paper or just
Yeah.
something for the conversation not to just be totally stalling or it on the other person's shoulders, try to go in with something, even if it's, goofy or silly, or you think the other person might think it's silly, like it gives you something to to fall
Yeah.
back on other than like, oh, how are you liking the conference? Or, how's the weather, like that kind of stuff. I mean, I believe in some parts of the world talking about the weather is actually interesting. In Australia, the weather is usually so similar.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really interesting. So it can feel more awkward than you might expect. Because why
Yeah.
on earth are we talking about the weather? It's just
Yeah.
what it always is, 25 degrees and sunny. So
We
um
talk about it
yeah,
all the
so I
time
think
at this
that's
end.
so
Yeah.
that's important too. Just have a couple of ideas up your sleeve.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, it's
That's
hard. It's hard, but I think, yeah, the key thing is just that it's about the cause and everything else kind of falls into place.
yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Before we wrap up, we've got someone sat in our audience who might want to ask some questions after our recording finishes as well, which we love doing. I want to ask you, Kate, some sort of more open questions, about how you kind of think about your work and the field and everything else. Yeah. The first one you've heard before, probably, if you listen. If we could take you to one place on the planet, yeah, you're nodding away, and you could see one species, yeah, where would you go? What would you hope to see?
Okay, so I want you to take me in a submersible, and I want to see a colossal squid.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's new. Have they ever been seen underwater? I don't think so.
I don't know about a
Like
colossal
they get
squid.
pulled
Maybe
up, don't they, by fishermen? Like they've been found
Mhm,
dead,
mhm.
and I've seen them in a tank in Wellington and places like that. But I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's ever seen one before, so that would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, I would be absolutely terrified.
Yeah,
Like to go in one of those submersibles, with all the pressure and the like that would be pretty scary experience. But yeah, like imagine seeing that thing, like whether they got like a 30 centimeter diameter eye, like these things are big critters. Yeah, everyone always talks about invertebrates being small, and I always
yeah,
like to remind people that that includes the most gigantic squids and
yeah, yeah.
um yeah, so that would be very cool.
That would be cool. My word. But yeah. Um, if we could make you a global czar for the day, yeah, you could be a global ruler, ruler of all humanity, and you can enact one law, one decree, make one change and make it stick to try and help the environment, nature, wildlife. Yeah, what would you kind of wave your magic wand if that's not mixing the metaphors too much? Like what would you do? Yeah.
Yeah, I I would like to. I don't know if this should require making all humans cyborgs or whatever, but I that might be too intrusive, so just stick with me. I would like to do something to um, have people notice the cool things about the everyday things. Um, to just not take the little ants walking on the path or the like the kind of plain-ish brown beetle, not take them for granted, but just have a look at them for a little while and check out what their life includes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that means that I'd like people to retain the curiosity of a child.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking as you were saying it. That's sort of going back to childhood, isn't it? It's about you getting a little beetle off the netball hoop, or yeah, or like for me, like kids, yeah, sort of watching insects and small things which we lose, yeah. And if we had that connection, we're far more likely to care, and if we're more likely to care, we're more likely to do something.
Yeah, we'd notice that our gardens had fewer critters.
Yeah,
Um, we'd notice these things. We notice, our windscreens being cleaner
yeah,
without someone having to point it out. Um, yeah, because I think it would give people a great deal more happiness,
hmm
um, and it would make the world a better place in terms of it would make nature more secure.
mm.
Um, and I don't know, I can be kind of painfully optimistic about things, but I do feel like that it might actually be possible to get a lot of people back there.
Mm.
Certainly, when people have kids or have grandkids, I think that is reawakened and those appreciations do kind of come back. But um, I don't think we have to just put it all on the kids' shoulders to to
Yeah,
lead us back there. I think we can do it ourselves.
yeah.
Yeah.
You said there you can be painfully optimistic. Like, are you optimistic for the future of wildlife, biodiversity?
One of my you probably feel weird about me saying this, but one of my heroes, Leslie Hughes, Professor Leslie Hughes,
Yeah.
um, who's a very big cheese in climate science, but also happened to be one of my second year undergraduate lecturers. Sorry about my numerical exercises, Leslie, they were a bit rubbish. I've already wanted to tell her that for years. Um, she says that hope is a strategy, and I think um, I think that kind of fits for me too, in terms of just hope is not a strategy, of course. We must do things. We mustn't just simply sit and hope. But the choice to feel hopeful
Yeah.
um, is a strategy that I think we need.
Mm. Mm.
Because I think the honest answer is no, I don't always feel optimistic
hmm Yeah.
about the future of nature and things like that. Um, but the painfully optimistic bit is around like the belief that people will do better,
Yeah.
will come together behind a cause, that will see the beauty and the importance and do the things that we need to do. Yeah, and I hope I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Hope is a choice. Yeah. And it enables, doesn't it? Yeah. It's an enabling choice. Yeah. Rather than retreating and burying and ignoring, we're proactively doing something, but it's hard. It's painful. Yeah.
Yeah, and you often don't feel that way, but you can choose to be that way.
Yeah,
You can choose to, yeah. So maybe you can't choose to feel it, but you can choose to act
yeah,
as if you are hopeful,
yeah.
um, in a strategic way to continue.
And you can apply that to almost anything actually as well. I'm thinking about when I left university and I graduated, and it was New Year's Eve. I remember really clearly standing outside with some friends. We were sort of banging pots and pans as we weirdly did at midnight. I don't know why. And I remember thinking, this time next year, I have no idea what I'll be doing. I had no job in front of me. I didn't know what it was. And there's like two choices. I can be worried and scared about that, or I can be hopeful and excited. Like, what if,
Mhm.
And I remember consciously choosing the kind of the hopeful, optimistic, and embracing that feeling. And it feels like if you're in your career and you're not sure what's next and there's uncertainty in front of you, this kind of hope, yeah, it can lead you. It can fill you with energy. Yeah, if you choose it. Yeah,
Yeah, I think we do have to choose it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, yeah.
Um, a final link question then, and I've really enjoyed our chat. Thank you, Kate. If we know that biodiversity is in decline, I don't want to kind of labor that too much, but yes, we are seeing insects and other animal species, yeah, going down year by year, and the reports can be quite worrying. What do we as a kind of conservation community, as a movement, as a sector, what should we be doing more of? What should we be better at? Like
Mm.
what to really kind of, yeah, to move the needle as quickly as we need it to move.
Making friends, bringing more people in,
Yeah,
I think. Um, yeah, gosh, I'm kind of loath to suggest anything in a way because everyone in the conservation sector is working so bloody hard all the time.
yeah,
Like it's everybody's putting their whole selves
yeah,
towards these causes, so and all different kinds of people are doing it. And so we have this great diversity of approaches and all of those sorts of things. So um, yeah, I mean, the things that kind of came to mind as you were talking were things like, being brazen to ask for more money,
yeah,
to ask the very top philanthropists, not just like the 50th
mm,
philanthropist on your list. Go to the top, why
mm,
not?
mm,
Those kinds of things. Perhaps we need to be a little bit more bold here and there. Everyone says communication, and of course, it's
mm,
always true. Um, but yeah, it's it's hard to sort of pinpoint any one thing. I think that's another thing that Leslie has said. Like, no one thing is likely to be, incredibly transformative. So, sticking together and
mm.
chipping away and being bold and brave as we go is probably my greatest hope for conservation.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Kate, thank you for sharing your time, your wisdom, yeah, your expertise with us. I really appreciate it. Yeah, if people want to find out more about you, your work, the Insect Conservation Lab or Invertebrates Australia, where should they go? Where should we send them?
Yeah, www.insectconservationlab.com or www.invertebratesaustralia.org. All the different social media and all that kind of stuff. And very happy to receive emails out of the blue from people that might be feeling a little bit awkward.
Yeah,
Just lead with, you said it was fine for me to email you as an awkward,
as the
and I'll
title. Yeah,
I'll be owning it. Yeah.
yeah,
No, it'd be lovely to
wonderful.
hear from people.
That's really kind. Thanks again, Kate. It's been lovely to chat.
Thank you, Nick. Lovely.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. If you did, then please do hit the subscribe button to get notified of new episodes as they drop. And also, please give us a rating or a review because it really helps us to get in front of more people, and we really enjoy reading them all. As you'll have heard, our podcasts are now recorded in front of a live audience who sit in and listen to the chat, and then after the mics are turned off, they get a chance to talk to the host, to share their thoughts, and also to ask questions. It's a really great format. If you'd like to be in the audience, all you you need to do is join the Conservation Careers Academy. Now, in the Conservation Careers Academy, you'll get full access to the world's biggest conservation job board, listing over 15,000 jobs, volunteer and internships across the globe each year. You'll also enjoy access to our amazing CC Pro private members community with regular events, networking and support. Plus, you'll get full access to our growing library of career-boosting resources, guides and templates. And best of all, it only costs a few dollars, euros or pounds per month to join the Academy. Now, to find out more, please visit conservation-careers.com/academy or simply click the join button at the top of our website. See you on the inside.